Native Minnesotan turned Fairport fixture, Chuck Smith is a highly regarded architect, well known for his residential and lake house designs. Today he discusses historic preservation, design in the public realm, and current housing issues in Erie Canal communities. Join us as we talk with Chuck Smith. Hey, Chuck.
Hi, Scott. How are you?
Good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a bit trying to get you in here. You're a busy guy.
Yeah, well, life and playing hockey get in the way. So
Yeah. Minnesotan.
Yeah, sure, you betcha.
Yeah.
So
Chuck, we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today, but let's talk about you first. Native of Minnesota, and then by a circuitous route, end up in Fairport. For a couple, 3 decades now.
Yeah, almost 3 decades.
Yeah, and raised a family. And
really 3 good decades, really.
Yeah, and become entrenched in the community, no matter how we try to get you out. So anyway, tell us a little bit about your background. You were born and raised in Minnesota?
Yes, I was. So you saw me drive up in a white Chevrolet.
I did.
Volt, which is a hybrid, plug-in hybrid.
Right.
So it gets really good gas mileage, and I drive a lot of local miles. But when I go down to the Finger Lakes for business, I do end up burning a little bit of gas. But at the point that I bought my white Chevy, I called my 3 brothers in Minnesota who all drive white Chevy trucks. And I told them I'm now driving a white Chevy, so they would be proud of me. Because prior to that, I was driving a Mini Cooper.
And that's what I was expecting to see roll up.
Yeah, and so clients always thought, wow, that architect is driving a Mini Cooper. That means that he's practical, he's cool, and
charges me too much.
and he's not driving a BMW, so the price is right.
Right.
So in fact, at an exit interview of a project that I got, a client said, one of the reasons we hired you is because you drove up in a Mini Cooper. And I said, well, cool. So so that tells me a little bit about me. I am practical. I try not to have a big ego. Sometimes you need a big ego in this business, but
right.
I usually try to keep that to the side because that's best for my clients. And I think it's best for our community if we keep our egos aside and think about, the greater good and the community. So.
Right. So born and raised in Minnesota, where'd you go to college?
I got really lucky. I got a full scholarship to go to Andover, Massachusetts, to Phillips Academy, one of the best high schools in the country.
Wow.
And for my last 2 years of high school. So not too many people know that I'm a prep.
No.
So, but I am a full-blown preppy. I guess even though I don't act that way, but I can act that way when I need to. So, because I understand. But so from Andover, 2 years at Andover, which really impressed me a lot, was really good for me. I was able to get into Cornell University to study, to get an architectural degree. So I got a Bachelor of Architecture degree at Cornell. It's a 5-year degree. And with that and a few years of apprenticing, I was able to get licensed in New York State. And I went to apprentice in Manhattan, New York City, and then met my lovely partner, wife, Jan, who grew up in Buffalo. She's a Buffalo gal.
Yeah.
Yep. And we were raising 2 kids in Hudson Valley and decided we were too far from Minnesota and too far from Buffalo. So we decided to pack up and move a business that I had at the time to Buffalo, but it was a recession. And lucky for us, we landed in Fairport instead of Buffalo. So it worked out good. We're an hour away from family in Buffalo, and, I love being in Fairport near the Finger Lakes, which turned out to be a good move for my business.
Right.
And here we are.
So let's talk about what your reputation is kind of built upon, pun intended. And that is you do a lot of lake house design as well as other residential stuff. But talk a little bit about your specialty as an architect.
I would say that I like to design to meet the needs of the client, obviously, first of all, but also the needs of the area, and trying to get something that's timeless, that fits into the context of the site, and that works really good for whatever you're designing. I happen to grow up around the lakes of Minnesota, land of 10,000 lakes.
Right.
So the fact that I was able to start working around the Finger Lakes was just a dream come true for me.
Right.
In fact, I went to college far above Cayuga's waters. So, the whole lake business thing for me is just is an amazing opportunity to design beautiful houses that are energy efficient, that work well for the site and for the client. And we are able to meet people from all around the country that are coming to the Finger Lakes to celebrate this area and build a home. But it's been interesting in that the majority of the clients that come here to the Finger Lakes are coming because they already been here in some way. They either grew up here, they used to come and visit grandma's house here, they went to college here. There's some reason that they know about the Finger Lakes. Right. So that's been an interesting part of the story of meeting clients here.
Now, I might be mistaken about this, but post and beam kind of styles or inclusion of that kind of look is a big part of what you do, or I don't want to generalize too much about like you're a one-trick pony or something.
timber framing.
Timber framing, there we go.
Using large timbers to create structure and beauty, making the interior house like a piece of furniture is one of the design elements that I can use, primarily because when we moved to upstate New York, I couldn't move my business, my architecture business up here, because you can't just hang a shingle without knowing anybody. So I worked for a company that designed and built timber frames for 9 years. And so I really got to know use of wood, reclaimed wood, timber framing, and now I'm able to use that as an element in my design. Not all people appreciate that or want that, but when they do or they ask for it, I can do a really good job of adding timber to the structure of the house or the building. Right. Sometimes it's not always houses that we work on. So
right,
yeah,
right. So you and I met, I don't know, was it 10, 15 years ago? When did you join the design committee? I can't even recall how that came to pass.
We probably met around the box factory or something. So
probably, since you had an office there.
Yeah. I don't know. I've enjoyed. I really enjoyed your invitation to join the partnership design committee, and we've done a lot of good work there. It's been wonderful to be surrounded by other professionals, people that care about the community, and work on projects that. We can add our collective knowledge to really improve those projects.
Yeah. So for those who might be watching or listening and don't know, the Fairport Partnership for a Better Community, originally Fairport Village Partnership, was an organization that I had the privilege of leading from 2005 to 2022. And in that, one of the committees of the partnership was and is the design committee. And that's populated by people like you, architects, engineers, urban planners, designers, landscape architects, just a host of incredibly talented people who either live and or work in Fairport and donate their time and talent to projects primarily in the public realm. But we've also been known to offer courtesy reviews of private developments going on in the village. Also, the design district overlay was developed by the partnership. Were you on the committee when we did that?
No,
Yeah.
I was not. I remember our work on the railroad viewing platform, the train viewing platform, which has turned out to be a tremendous success.
Yeah, I mean, the homework showed that it would be a 365-day of the year tourist attraction, and it has done that.
Yeah.
And the object there is obviously while they're here, they're going to shop and dine and do other things in Fairport.
Yeah, it's nice that we feel we can be proactive with projects, because if you're on a board, a village board, you have to you have to look at what comes in, what applications come in. You don't really get an opportunity to be creative and offer ideas on projects that or issues that might need to be thought out. So we're able to do that, which is really a powerful situation.
Yeah, another similar project was the reconstruction of the Veterans Memorial at Potter Park.
Yeah.
When the design committee basically took that to drawings, and then one of the members took the drawings in-house to his architectural firm, got them stamped, and got them to construction-ready documents. And it cost the community nothing, really, essentially. Yeah. I think the filing fee was all the architectural firm charged us. It was their hard cost.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, but that has changed over the years. It seems there was change in the wind when I left the partnership in 22. And it seemed like the village was utilizing that resource less and less willfully. I mean, it was their choice. And I'm not terribly close to the partnership these days, but from what I understand, that really hasn't changed much. Somebody showed me some drawings of some work for the waterfront. So it was a new flag design for the waterfront. Yeah,
we're working on flags or banners for the waterfront, for the Canal waterfront. We've been actively working on adding public art to the village.
Right.
And both with through the partnership and also working with the art committee. There is an art committee, official art committee in the village of Fairport. So that's our one connection to the village at the moment. We have reviewed the Main Street improvements plan and offered our suggestions there.
Was that at their request, or?
No, but you're right. We haven't really been asked to help with the village in any way other than where we kind of look at things and say, gee, I think maybe we should, as citizens, put our collective minds together and offer some suggestions.
Yeah, it's baffling to me that they don't avail themselves of the resource as has been done in the past and successfully. You mentioned the train viewing platform again. Basically, the design was developed by the committee, and I think you're the one who ended up taking them to construction drawings and
yes, that's
getting
correct.
them stamped.
Yep.
It's a fantastic asset that they've just chosen. Now they are, as far as I can tell, just paying outside contractors to do work that the citizens would do for basically nothing. So it's very disappointing to see that evolution or devolution of the role of the committee vis-a-vis the village. So the design committee had a lot to do with a lot of things in the village, but not so much in the past few years, which is kind of a disappointment to me. I spent a big part of my career, working with the partnership and for the community and with people like you. And it's kind of a shame not to see it utilized any longer.
It might just be an ebb and flow, in as far as projects that need to be looked at. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Well, I think, for example, the design district overlay was a partnership project. Huh. And the partnership design committee essentially drafted that and ran it by the village, and the village ended with some modifications, ended up adopting that plan. And I remember one live instance when we were doing a courtesy review of a new construction on Main Street next to the Baptist Church. Were you there then? I
was there. Yeah. I remember that conversation. We helped the developer out there.
But it wasn't like, what we did was make him aware of the design district overlay, which he wasn't aware of.
That's right.
And the parameters that are put forward for new construction in that code, if you will, that district, which included, giving him a better idea of what he can do on the site,
Yeah, he was the design overlay district was looking to improve this Main Street as a more urban space, and that allowed him a little bit more volume that he didn't even know about.
Right.
So you're right. Just pointing that out to him, we don't design his building for him. He had a talented architect, so we just pointed it out, and I think the results turned out to be great.
Yeah. I think it's. Again, one of the value-added things that because not only does the developer get to build something more than he thought he could, the village realizes an enhancement in their tax base as a consequence of a larger structure with, So it's a win-win. It also does do a really good job of infill in a space that had been, in a different era, been underutilized, I think.
Yep. Yep, I agree.
And I think the village has a history of it's kind of checkered. It's not all bad, but it doesn't all hang together terribly well sometimes. There was a wonderful 19th century commercial block or two on South Main Street that were raised in the name of urban development.
Yeah, in the 1970s.
Yeah. Like every other American city.
We lost a lot of fine buildings and some not so fine buildings.
Right.
But we lost a lot of history and texture, and when you have a lot of federal funds coming in, and you create this big plan, the development isn't incremental. It doesn't form in a natural way. So it becomes this big stamp of construction that really stomps on the village. And what we have is not as good as what was there, I would say. So that's an unfortunate aspect of all that federal funds coming in, and the the village fathers asking to use those funds. And, if we go back further, we'll find that just about every corner of the village, in fact, our four corners of Church Street and Main Street, were all gas stations, except for one beautiful Baptist church.
Right.
So, there was no thought about the future there.
Right. Right. So now we're into historic structures, and you are and have been for a long time a member of the Historic Preservation Committee for the village.
Yes, I was the one on the first selection committee. I was one of the first members, and I still am a member. For many years on and off, I've been the chair of the committee, and really enjoyed it. I think that the thing that I enjoy the most about historic preservation and that in the village of Fairport is as a committee member, as a commission member, I've gotten to learn a lot about how Fairport came to be, the history of Fairport, and it's fascinating. I mean, we started out, obviously as a stop on the Erie Canal, right? Mm-hmm. So,
right.
Very basic thing. It's in our name. But now historic preservation has slowed down a little bit in that we've established we've locally designated what we feel were the critical, most important buildings in the village. There's still a handful that really deserve to be locally designated, but the owners aren't interested in that and being encumbered by the designation. So we've respectfully backed off and not rammed it down their throats, so to speak. But historic preservation for any property can be a very, very positive aspect. It doesn't really harm your resale value or anything. But nevertheless, at this point, the commission is pretty much looking at maintaining the locally designated properties that we have. So if a property gets improved or there's some changes to be made, we review it and offer a certificate of appropriateness for those changes, and we offer good, solid information on how people can renovate their homes. We give them ideas, we give them material ideas, we can help them with thoughts on how things can be done in a practical way and still meet the needs of the historic character of the building. So we're sort of in a maintenance mode. At the moment, we are looking at potentially designating an area as a district, which would give tax incentives to everybody that would be have a building within that district, state tax credits. So that's a positive aspect to historic preservation, is that there can be some financial incentives for people to help maintain older structures. And other than that, historic preservation. It's been going on in Fairport now for probably 14 years, maybe.
So you use the term encumbrance. How does having that designation on a structure encumber it? I think a lot of people feel like they can't do what they want with their property once they've received that designation.
Yeah, it's so it what it involves is that if you make any improvements that can be seen from the street, that needs to be reviewed by historic preservation. And it doesn't mean necessarily that you can't change things. You just change things in a way that is appropriate to the architecture and history of the building. So you can still add on to the building. You can still change your door, change your windows, repair your porch. But you need to just be cognizant of those changes being appropriate to the history of the building. So I really look at it as, if you have an older structure that is part of the fabric and history of a community, that you become a steward of that property. And when you buy it, you know you are a steward of that property. And then you leave it to the next steward of that property, the next owner, to take care of that property, because it really provides the history and the fabric of our community, which makes Fairport special. So,
right.
That is the fact that Fairport is a walkable community with, the resources of the canal, and it's beautiful. It's got trees. It's got good schools. It's made the village very popular. So that puts pressure on some of these older properties. And so I'm glad we have historic preservation to help with that. So,
yeah, I think it's a very important aspect of the overall maintenance of the character of the village.
Yeah, I think historic preservation needs to, historic preservation commission needs to be friendly. They need to be cognizant of the property owner's rights. They need to, they need to be helpful and not harmful in how they wield their review powers. And there are other historic preservation commissions out in the area that don't have quite as nice of a reputation. And so,
you mean historic preservation committees in other communities?
Correct. Yeah.
Which may or may not begin with the letter P.
I'm being very cautious here. So,
as is your nature.
Yeah. And so, we need to be a helpful, friendly commission. We do not want to be a scary, foreboding group that is looked at as being negative in any way.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, I think so far so good in Fairport.
I
think the committee has in general been discreet in utilizing their powers, such as they are.
Yeah. I remember the first building that I looked at to be the champion of meaning I did the research, looked at its history, suggested that this building gain local designation, and my fellow commissioners agreed, was the First National Bank of Fairport, which has been a bank for many, many years. But I looked at that beautiful structure and thought, that bank may not be a bank someday, so we probably want to protect it, because it's and now it's being renovated and going to become a restaurant,
right,
which is a perfect use for that beautiful space.
It's a wonderful space.
And because of our local designation, we were able to review the plans for an addition to that building, and we worked with the developer and in a really nice, positive fashion, and this building is gaining another life, not as a bank, but hopefully as a space that we can all enjoy a fine meal in, and it worked out good. So that's a situation where, we were a little proactive in recognizing that this was an important element of this fabric of this community. A lot of the Main Street buildings, as we mentioned, due to urban renewal, were torn down. So that was one of the few. We had a toothless smile on Main Street there for a while.
Well, we kind of still do. The little pocket park there, opposite that, is really an underutilized parcel. Yeah, in its current use. I'm an aggressive person as far as utilizing underutilized spaces. Like, I think if the village would want to be proactive in providing more housing, they would identify those little spaces and say, "Wow, we could fill in infills right there, put in 3-story buildings with retail below and living above," which is a way that main streets all around the country have survived for centuries. Yeah. And create more tax base at the same time, much like the village did with the old DPW property along the canal, which is now 30-some condo units, creating tax base and residents who walk into the village to eat lunches and dinners and buy things. So it was a wonderful use of village property that really was underutilized. Right. So, yeah. Well, there's clearly a housing shortage, and I think the village is trying to look at what can be done to improve the availability and affordability of housing in the village, which leads us to the whole community-based code that they're looking to implement, I think, in the first quarter of 25, according to their timeline, which I looked at this morning. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of concern around that, and I think part of the concern might come from some of the language that is used in the rationale for it up front, because I think there's certain word choices that were made that raise alarm with some people. When you're talking about equitable and inclusive, obviously those are connotations that it's all about context, right? I mean, I think in the context of what the CBC is saying, okay, I get that. Unfortunately, those words have baggage from other, uses or contexts, and so I think that raised the alarm. And my thinking, and actually, after talking to you a week or so ago, has evolved a bit on that. I was pretty vehemently against it. I still have great concerns about what's being proposed. But I wanted to get your take on the CBC, especially as it relates to what additional population density, without really, you're not expanding the footprint. There aren't many empty lots, such as you've indicated, would be ideal. There just aren't. There's a concern about, ADUs, population density, the impacts on the infrastructure, the quality of life for single-family homes that would be near any of these currently single-family homes that might be allowed expanded use into multifamily homes. So I'd like to get your take on all that, and how do we do this without essentially changing the character of the village, the character that makes it so attractive to begin with?
Yeah, I think there already are a couple fairly large areas, couple districts, streets that are zoned for multifamily and 2-family, 3-family as of right. I believe East Church Street along there, some larger properties. That's all, and also I think Parse. Is it Parse? I believe.
Oh yeah,
right. That's.
I think
that's
so.
where we have
on the backside of the cannery complex.
Yeah, that which is actually a B1 district, which allows for multifamily.
Right.
Strangely, it doesn't allow for single family, which is what it is. So that was a strange use of zoning. Sometimes zoning is a little arbitrary, I think,
right,
when you see those kind of things. But as far as increasing the available housing, my feeling is, look at underutilized parcels that the village might own and create a bigger tax base for us. And I don't believe that it's very difficult to take a single family or home and make it into a 2-family, or even worse, a 3-family, because of codes, because of building codes. It's somewhat difficult. So in the New York State, so I'm looking at it from a vantage point as an architect, and then I'll switch to a different vantage point. But as an architect, you take a single family house, you can easily change it to a 2-family, because the the residential code of New York State includes 1 and 2 family houses. So it's just a 1-hour rated wall between the 2 units. So it's fairly easy to split a house into 2. And you actually don't see any change in footprint. You might see a change in number of users, but to change it to a 3-family takes it into the general building code, which is a whole nother level of change for the building, and that's very difficult to do properly. So there are a few 3-families in the village now. I actually don't know how many. I'm sure the village knows, but they were done before zoning, and so they're there. They're serving a purpose of providing some rentals in the village, and I don't want to take those away from anybody, but they weren't done to today's standards of safety and fire separation.
Right. So they're grandfathered in?
They're grandfathered in,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So even to take a large parcel, I mean, I would think that the only place I would feel comfortable with trying to create a 3-family is a very large parcel, where you've got the room you've got a large house or a large building that you could divide up and properly separate it. Now, where I see the opportunity is I'm actually in favor of somehow allowing in-law suites or grannies flats, or if you want to call them ADUs. There's a way I think that we should allow people to provide for extended family, because I believe that extended family and larger family groups or larger groups are something that we've had in our history,
right?
Over again centuries.
Right.
People would live together, grandma and grandpa and mom and dad and
kids,
would come in and leave and come back, and you could accommodate that. And, I know I've got some older residents on my street. They would love to stay there, but they have a hard time, potentially affording their place. If they could have a little ADU or granny flat to help them pay the taxes, it would be good for them. if I have family members, I have sons who, if they move back to Fairport and they would want to live there while my wife and I grow old, and they can take care of us, it'd be great if they had a in-law suite or something that they could stay and live with us, and that would be awesome. So I think there are a lot of really good examples of those kind of laws that have already been written, and the examples are there. So I'm kind of in favor of that kind of thinking, because that would serve the residents of Fairport to simply take a building and offer it out there as a single family house, and offer it out there, and somebody could split it up into two family and make it into a commercial property, in other words, a rental property, doesn't do us any favors. In fact, it hurts us, because it's going to take away the ability of my son or somebody buying a property in the village of Fairport, because all of a sudden we're taking away available housing for young families that might want to buy these houses and live in them without being, a commercial rental property. So to me, owner occupancy is really important to the fabric and maintenance of a community, and the
transient populations don't have the same investment. They don't care for a property the way an owner does.
No. And however, there is a place for people to be able to rent in the village.
I currently rent in the village.
There you go.
Yeah, and I've owned a home in the village. So I mean, which was a duplex. But it's the way it was when I purchased it. But you mentioned the whole somebody wants to build a portfolio of homes. Well, the home I purchased was from a gentleman and his wife who owned a portfolio of homes in the village. That as they were ready to retire, they were divesting of. They maintained them themselves, and they were done. And I ended up looking at 3 of them and purchased the one I did on Roselawn Avenue. Mm-hmm. So I get how that works, and it can benefit, because he did break his portfolio out, and not all of them, but many of them went to first-time or new home buyers or second, whatever, but to individuals who are going to live there, or at least in part of the building, because virtually all of them were multifamily structures. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other thing I just wanted to mention, as I was looking at the information on the village website, one of the packets for one of the meetings, I came across this list of unpaid tax detail, and there's 26 homes on this list, and I said, well, how many of those are either owned by the same individual or a corporate entity, if you will? Mm-hmm. And so of the 26, 10 of those properties that are in arrears are evidently under LLCs or owned by the same individual. All of them are LLC except for 2 of them, which are owned by the same individual, which brings up the question of, how responsible would a absentee landlord or corporate landlord be as opposed to an individual? I know I would just be embarrassed beyond words if I owned a property and my name was on this list. But I think business people have, not the same kind of onus.
Yeah, I think that, I think part of the thought process of changing the zoning to try to create more housing units is a response to a bubble that we're facing. And if you look at real estate values over the past, 20 or 30 years, we've had 5 or 6 real estate bubbles. And we're all aware of the bubble in 2008, which was the subprime bubble, I believe. Yeah. I mean, they all have names. Yeah. I can't remember.
That was the subprime bubble.
I'm an architect. I don't know the names, but So now we have another bubble that that is growing, and it's going to burst. And part of that bubble is caused by owner occupancy fraud, in the fact that a lot of these properties you're talking about are financed as though they're owner occupied, so they're getting favorable financial terms that are set up for owner occupants, but they're not. They're LLCs, or they're commercial ventures, which means they really should be paying commercial rates, not subsidized.
I hadn't thought of that aspect.
Subsidized rates that one would get for first-time homeowners.
Right.
And so when the bubble bursts, all those LLCs, they get rid of these properties, they dump them, and the bank ends up holding them, which means then we all get to pay for the fixing the problem, or there's so much value placed in homes now that it could really damage the economy if and it usually does when a bubble bursts.
Yeah.
We can see what happens. In 2008, when that bubble burst, my business was 5 years old. We were going great guns, and then by 2009, our sales were cut in half. So real estate shenanigans can hurt us all, and that is happening again, and we need to be careful that we don't, in the village, we don't do anything to help that process get worse.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the overall impact, whether it's increasing population density through allowing more multifamily homes, or the incredible success of the repurposing of the industrial site, the cannery, into dining, drinking, and entertainment venue. There's also some other retail in there as well. And I think to me, one of the unintended consequences of that is kind of an accelerated urbanization of this once charming little Victorian village. And there's other components to that too. It's some of what has been done. And I know there's a big streetscape reconstruction happening here soon. But I think there's been a lot of choices made that has lent itself to creating a more urbanized feel, even in our business district, which 10 years ago didn't have the same feel. The proliferation of loud crossing signs and flashing crossing signs and orange flags for people to wave as they cross the street, and all this that just gives it a much bigger town feel than what we are, and certainly what we felt like 10 years ago. And so that's a concern to me, the almost 24-hour aspect of life in the village, in the core of the village. I'm only a block off of Main Street currently, and so definitely a very different environment than just a few blocks over when I lived on Roselawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't see that in my neighborhood because I'm far enough away from the urban area that doesn't impact me, other than on Canal days when our street gets parked up, even though we're 6 blocks away. But yeah, I don't know. I rent in the Box Factory, which is in the heart of this entertainment district, and I really enjoy the activity and excitement of the area and people coming in. I'm not sure if that the cannery district and the urbanization of Fairport is a negative thing, in that I believe that if it's increasing our tax revenue, it's got to help us all in the long run. And I think that what may be missing with that whole district is not looking at it as also being a mixed use having some residential components to that. Right. And I think that would be a more complete use of that area. I'm sure that there would be people that would love to live in that kind of thing. And they would be younger than you and I, Scott. So I know that
probably younger than our children too.
Right. But again, there's a lot of square footage over in the cannery that's not utilized up in the upper floors, which could be converted to residential. So if the issue of traffic that you were mentioning as far as pedestrian crossings and things is something that I don't believe is an issue with the cannery necessarily or the restaurants that are in town as much as we are a crossroads of this eastern part of the county, and there's two ways to get through an east-west and a north-south, and we get a lot of traffic coming through that doesn't stop here. It's going elsewhere. And whatever we do to slow that traffic down is fine with me because I'm trying to cross these streets to go to my office or go to the local pub, and, I don't want to get clipped in the process. So.
Right. Well, a lift bridge and three sets of railroad tracks helps to slow things down too.
Yeah, those are all good speed bumps that we put in place. Yeah. So,
and there is an argument to be made that those components also help our local businesses while you're sitting there unable to move.
Right.
You actually have time to look around and see what the village has to offer.
Yeah, see what you're missing. So stop next time. Give us time to stop by and say hello to us. So yeah. So the problem we're solving with the CBC is it's more than one thing. It's trying to create more housing available and affordable. Let's define affordable too. I think that's another word that frightens people. Well, you can't create more housing and guarantee that it's affordable when you're in a popular area. The more housing you create, you're just creating more expensive housing because it's a popular area. So unless you try to subsidize this housing, it's not going to be affordable, depending on what affordable is. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I noticed.
So I don't think that more units is necessarily solving any affordability issues. Again, I think that affordability and housing should be controlled more by the individual property owners, and that's why I like the idea of allowing granny flats or ADUs that people can spend their own money to develop, talk to their neighbors, create their space, and create something that's affordable because it's for their family or it's for a friend, and they can charge whatever they want for their ADU. So that makes it affordable. If you're just creating 2 and 3 family units out there, the only way somebody can afford to build that is to charge top rents, top rated, or top dollar for your rents, as you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
So I don't understand. There is no component of affordability in changing the zoning unless you look at it from an individual viewpoint.
So most affordable housing, lower income brackets, is going to be subsidized by the government anyway, right? I mean, that's one way that objective is achieved.
Correct. Yeah.
Then the question becomes, well, what if it's, a parcel comes available on West Church? We won't say. There's been a rumor for years that there's one that's currently used for offices that could end up being divested by its current owner and redeveloped.
Yeah, except it's single family zoned at the moment, isn't it?
Exactly. So what does this zoning do to, that's a consideration, right? I mean, if the zoning has changed there, would it allow for multifamily beyond 3 bedrooms, something considerably larger in an affordable vein, subsidized, or don't you see that?
I don't see that, no.
Okay.
No, I do not. All
right.
Yeah, I think that, there's, the other issue is looking at the valuation of some of these three-family multi-dwelling units that are already there, because my experience is that they're assessed, and so they're not paying their fair share of taxes as well. So, why is that? So those kind of things go on too. And
when I sold the Roselawn property, one of the reasons I did was that after a year or so of being a landlord, and I had no intent of, accruing a portfolio of rental properties, for the slim amount of money I was making, it just was not worth the responsibility of being a landlord. And so I sold it. And did very well after only 5 years of ownership, because it's Fairport and the market was exploding and still is. And then turned around and gave about 45% of it to the various government entities who tax you to death. So there was no great advantage in it at all.
Well, I mean, so part of the housing bubble that's happening now is because people are looking at housing and residential housing as people housing as an investment and not as a home, not as a place to. It's no longer a home or a place for people to raise their families. It's an investment, and so the property values keep going up and up, and you've got a lot of players buying single-family properties. You've got corporations, as you mentioned.
Right.
You've got people that are flippers that are buying properties. You've got, everyone is thinking that this is the way to my riches, is to buy houses and make a portfolio. So now residential, the residential world is no longer a place of shelter. It's a place of investment. And there's nothing the village can do with their zoning to stop that.
Right.
Although there is one thing that I want to mention, and that's something that was raised by one of my employees who lives next to a house that was being used as an Airbnb. Now, if you want a real pain in the rear neighbor, live next to an Airbnb, because every weekend you have stuff going on that, you'll never see those people again, so they don't care what they're doing. And you have children in your yard and you have something going on next door, so you call the Fairport police, and the Fairport police come by and tell them that there's a curfew or they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. And some communities now are changing laws to try to dissuade or not allow Airbnbs. And I know that's very difficult to enforce, because that falls on the code enforcement official,
right,
possibly. And that's not a fun position to be in at that point. But if the village wants to look at zoning to help the quality of life of their residences, they should be looking at that kind of thing, because when a house gets sold as an Airbnb, it's no longer on the market for a young family that wants to move into Fairport. So now that young family is competing against, again, a real estate investor.
Yeah. Now, that is an area where you and Rob Corby are in violent agreement. He's really concerned about the proliferation of Airbnbs in Pittsford. And when he was here with me, he really went on. And your comments about it, your observations about it, are completely in line with what he was saying and the concerns there in Pittsford, which is a much smaller village than Fairport. Generally speaking, smaller houses, smaller lot sizes. So, the intensity of that intrusion gets worse, I think, in that environment. But it is true that a lot of residential housing is ending up in portfolios such as BlackRock, who buying up all over the country, which, you will own nothing and be happy, I guess, is the philosophy there. So I am concerned about Airbnbs as well. I get that, and it is a common theme I'm hearing now. Yeah,
and I don't know if that's addressed in the latest code changes.
I don't know how they could, Well,
it's been done in Hammondsport. It's been
you can regulate Airbnbs.
Yes, you can. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
You can't regulate BlackRock buying a property. No,
you can't. But being aware and tell quickly what did Hammondsport do to regulate Airbnb?
They actually require that the owner occupancy for something like that. So you can't rent out the entire property. So you can do an Airbnb as a room within your private residence, but you can't not live there. So it has to be owner occupied, which is the case, which is the problem with the issue that I've seen in Fairport. There are houses that aren't owner occupied that are being rented entirely as an Airbnb.
Yeah.
So there's no point of responsibility there.
Yeah. There's one within a block, less than a block of me that I'm aware of, and I think you're probably know more than I do, but it's definitely a cause for concern, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's some simple things within the code that can be changed. I mean, just look at the issues that come up time and time again in front of planning and zoning, and you can figure out what parts of the code aren't working. And for example, about 10 years ago, there was a code change to require driveways to be 10 feet from our property line. But that's not the case in all of traditional Fairport. Our property line is right on the line.
Correct.
So every time somebody tries to put their driveway where everyone else's driveway is, it goes in front of the zoning board. So those are simple things that can be fixed to just recognize the historic nature of this village. We're not in a suburban setting where driveways can be 10 feet away from a property line.
Right.
We're on quarter-acre lots and garages in the back, and so if there are issues, you take your opportunity now to fix them with the new code. But like you said, we don't need to create problems that don't exist. Or try to solve problems that don't exist.
Right, exactly.
Right,
and that's a great concern. So we're running out of time here. Any parting thoughts? Anything you wanted to touch on we haven't?
Yeah, I would say that I'm gonna take this opportunity to do a shout out to Strong Towns, which is an organization run out of northern Minnesota by Chuck Moran, who's a civil engineer who is empowering small communities to take care of business through a citizen initiatives. And so if anybody's looking for more information about ADUs or how to make your community better, check out Strong Towns.
Strong Towns, website?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Google Strong Towns.
Yep. They're full of really great information.
Oh, and I don't know if we ever actually defined what ADU stands for. It's accessory dwelling unit.
Correct. Yeah.
A little late in the game to find that, but we got there.
I suppose. Yeah.
Well, listen. Thanks for spending an hour here.
Yeah, you're welcome. I was looking forward to this. I've never had an opportunity to join anybody in a podcast. So,
well, we're kind of learning.
Interesting to hear my voice at some point.
we're learning as we go here, and I think what we really want to focus on is exactly the kind of things we were talking about today, and we spoke with Rob about things that are really relevant to the local communities, especially since with the changes in media these days. Where are we getting this information? Where are we having this discussion? And frankly, there aren't many places to have those discussions, to get information, to get opinions that, from experts such as yourself. so that we as citizens can have informed positions on these issues. And so that's the goal. And it won't always be a topic like this. It may just be a new business we want to talk about, or someone who's been doing some wonderful things in the community for a long time, whatever it is. But this podcast, I feel like there's an opportunity to fill a niche that the weekly papers used to have in the community, which have evaporated. They're gone.
Yeah, there used to be a newspaper with an editorial section, and I could write in and say my thing, right?
So. Right. So this is a voice, right? Let's exercise our First Amendment and talk about things that are important to us.
Yeah, in a friendly manner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Let's go have a beer.
All right.